Clark Kent glasses now. The story I'm going to read tonight is called Kiss Off. It's a short story by J. Angelo Brancaleone. I use Angelo in this byline for one because the name of the book is Saga Familia. If you speak Italian, which I don't, it's called Family History. This particular is very special for me to read this tonight because this is the whole book. What I'm not going to read the whole book. We'd have to stay here for 3 or 4 weeks to do that. But this is the whole book. So all the content of the story I'm going to read you tonight is covered in all the chapters of Saga Familia, which are about 40 chapters now. This book has been going on for a long time, and hopefully this will be part of the conclusion of it. So I will start. And there might be a little interactive moment, so heads up, because you want to participate in this maybe. Okay, Kiss Off. 2 fatal incidents within a year changed the course of Jeff DeSante's life. Yes, Jeff DeSante is the lead character. He's died in a plane crash. And J. Angelo Brancaleone, has written his story. He willed me his journals, and I've written this Saga Familia out of his journals. Okay, the death of his father and uncle. Mr. DeSante died alone in a big house in Chicago. Ian O'Malley was fatally shot in Detroit in his party store. Jeff had been estranged from his family for years. His older brother Nicholas found and called Jeff with the news and a double negative question. "I guess you're not coming to the funeral." Jeff answered, "Dad's been dead for a long time, only he didn't know it." Jeff sent flowers in his place. Jeff said goodbye. He hung up the phone, and home movies began reeling in his head. Jeff didn't see eye to eye with his father since he was a teen. The film projected their last quarrel. Jeff called his father a fool. His father called Jeff a punk and grabbed his throat. Jeff wiggled free from the chokehold and bolted. Up in his room, he packed his army duffel bag and left. His destination was Fort Knox, Kentucky, and back to basic training where he was safe. That's supposed to be funny. Jeff flew to Detroit for his favorite uncle's funeral. He boarded the plane in Newark, knowing the risk he was taking. His Aunt Marissa O'Malley hated Jeff's father, her brother. Curiosity killed the cat, he thought to himself. During the World War II, Mr. DeSante was instrumental in getting young Ian into the Merchant Marines and not being a target in the front lines. That's when he was courting Catherine O'Malley. He was also responsible for getting him into the jukebox business. After the war, Mr. DeSante, now his brother-in-law, hired him. Instead of Ian O'Malley transporting bombs singing the Mariners' "Heave-ho, lads," he delivered jukeboxes to restaurants, bars, and dance halls. Ian's on-the-job training was going from spot to spot, delivering pop records, servicing coin-operated machines, and collecting the money. The nickels, dimes, and quarters jukeboxes were originally called Nickelodeons. Hundreds of jukeboxes amounted to thousands of dollars weekly. Mr. DeSante promised Ian a rich future. He didn't mention ulcers that came with the job from worrying about the Internal Revenue Service and mafia competition. Jeff arrived in Detroit and Michigan, Grosse Pointe, from Newark, wondering if his Aunt Marissa O'Malley would recognize him after years of separation. "Mio Dio! Mio Dio!" That's my Italian. Shouted out. Aunt Marissa in St. Clair Church with huge dome ceiling. "Niponte! Nephew!" she wailed in joy and grief. They hugged as mourners looked on by the casket. Jeff stayed in town for a few days and agreed to come back to talk more after his aunt recovered. Aunt Marissa was ready for Jeff when he returned. She had assembled the DeSante archival material. There were hundreds of photographs and movies. Aunt Marissa didn't waste any time talking about her brother, husband, and the jukebox business. Shenanigans. Jeff felt like news correspondent getting a scoop on his father. Aunt Marissa told stories as if he was right there living them. Jeff learned about things before he was born and after, when he was too young to remember or understand. Mr. DeSanti's vending machine business was booming after the war. Like many, the family looked normal from the outside, North Shore upscale community. He was a Rotarian, made big donations to the Glencoe Sacred Heart Church, and belonged to the yacht club. Mr. DeSanti thought of himself as a good father. He privileged boys who received the best education and medical attention. He always reminded Jeff and Nick of his poor immigrant childhood. Mrs. DeSanti drove a Cadillac, wore the latest fashion with pearls and diamond jewelry. She was a clothes horse with 2 walk-in closets. She had everything but her health. Catherine and Jeff DeSanti entertained in their grand colonial home in the winter. When the season changed, they cooked out on the garden patio with giant field rock grill. The inside of the beautiful DeSanti home was crumbling. Mrs. DeSanti suffered from rheumatoid arthritis. Their oldest son, Nicholas, was always into trouble. Mr. DeSanti was under a lot of stress with his thriving company. Their youngest son, Jeff, good-natured, played with his toys and scribbled. Myrtle, the live-in maid, kept the house in order, cooking, cleaning, caring for Mrs. DeSanti, and nannying young Jeff. She comforted the whole family with her homemade desserts of pies, cookies, and cakes. Marissa spoke openly about her complicity in the criminal activity of her husband and brother. She detested her brother's crafty ways and disregard for others' feelings. She blamed her brother for her husband's death. Ian quit on the spot when being accused of embezzling. The O'Malleys moved to Detroit and opened a party store. Jeff was young when the O'Malleys disappeared without explanation. Years later, his favorite uncle was killed shielding a stock boy from violent robbers. Jeff and his initial meeting with his aunt went well. They continued to talk on the phone, and Jeff visited her every chance he got. Marissa's stories were captivating. Her delivery was eloquent. She also spoke Italian and became Jeff's Berlitz language school teacher. In her fury towards her brother, she punctuated her statements in Italian. She called him a citatrillo, cucumber head, dummy, mamaluco, idiot, fool. That's my Italian, huh? If she detected Jeff didn't understand, she'd say, capiche? She was also dramatic. She talked about her brother as if present in the face of the devil. Those scenes were like Dickens' Christmas Carol and her brother, the ghost of Christmas past. Marissa told the story of how they all met. Jeff was too young to recall. He was wowed by the handsome man in dress blues soon after his Merchant Marine discharge. Kathleen was thrilled. Her son and brother delighted in each other. Catherine had a small tailor-made uniform made and photograph made of Jeff, her 2 seamen in identical sailor suits. It was displayed prominently in the living room. Every time she glanced at it, she was tickled till the day she died. Jeff's admiration for her Uncle Ian grew as he did. He'd watch him service jukeboxes, craft stained glass windows for kitchen cabinet doors, and restore furniture like new. He built a speedboat from scratch, and Jeff and Ian raced it on Lake Michigan. When waterways were clear, Ian would let Jeff steer. In the thrilling times, Jeff lived out his favorite book and movie, Rudyard Kipling's Captain Courageous. Reading the story, Jeff imagined he was the lad, and Ian was the fisherman. Jeff enjoyed a few summers with his uncle on the boat until Marissa came aboard. He was surprised Marissa, his aunt, and much younger father's sister. She was also a lot more fun than her fuddy-duddy dad. Jeff enjoyed his aunt and uncle's company until he felt like the third wheel. Seasons changed, and so did Jeff along with the clan. His uncle and aunt married. His brother married Romney, his high school sweetheart. The whole family was upset about the union except Jeff. Jeff knew Nick and Romney's story before anyone else. He found Nick's hidden love letters from Romney when she was sent away to school. Jeff was fascinated with the whole mess. He knew that they were married by a justice of the peace. Jeff's parents wouldn't accept it. Romney walked up the church aisle pregnant. She was properly married in the eyes of family, friends, and God. Jeff DeSantis' family was changing, and so was his next incarnation. It was about high school, going to Art Institute of Chicago, getting drunk with his buddies, and dating. His body and mind were changing, driven by dragon teenage angst and raging hormones. Anne Marissa's return to Jeff was godsend. Jeff learned about his father's illicit business transactions, unreported jukebox income, and willful tax fraud. Mr. DeSantis was exonerated of any wrongdoing. He even rented a building space to the government to put in post offices he built with dirty money after the court cases. A few years after his talks with Aunt Marissa, he had an epiphany. He was at an auto show at the McCormick Place at the largest convention center in the United States on Lake Michigan in Chicago. Every year for more than a decade, Jeff attended auto shows all over the country, introducing new cars for Volkswagen. Jeff was tired of believing in advertising as a religion. He got paid handsomely for selling his soul. He was bored with the Pulitzer of Literature taglines like, "The ultimate driving machine," and "I ate the whole thing," and "Plop, plop, fizz, fizz." Does anybody have their own favorite slogan or tagline? Great. Cornflakes, do you have one?
I just like Das Auto.
That's good. Say it louder.
Das Auto.
And what does that mean?
The car.
The car, okay. Anybody else? What's another one? See the USA in your Chevrolet. That's a real oldie. Okay, so we'll get on with the story. Let's see. Jeff's friends and associates drove him crazy, and themselves. Those of the advertising executives who didn't commit suicide were saved with great medical benefits. They got therapy in great recovery rehabilitation centers. They were treated for substance abuse, mental stress, promiscuous relationships, and went back to Madison Avenue. Jeff took the road less traveled, as his friends were always telling him he should write a book. They weren't saying it because they thought he could. They said it because they were tired of listening to his stories. Jeff learned a lot about his family's story from Aunt Marissa. They had all the ingredients of a good organized crime and saga familia, family history. Jeff used for inspiration Mario Puzo's The Godfather and Gay Talisa's Honor Thy Father. He liked the saying, "You can't have courage unless you have fear." Jeff had plenty. He began to scribble on paper with a new list of slogans from renowned anthropologist Joseph Campbell. "Follow your bliss," Explorer Ernest Shackleton, "Dead Ahead," and Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi, "May the Force be with you." Stay tuned for the next story. Thank you.